have the dream and plan that if I can work with my kids enough that they can not have those things happen, and I hope that'll be the case. I don't know.
I think you can. I absolutely believe that you can.
I hope so. I'm not quite of the belief. A lot of people have that kind of like, oh well, they have to learn from themselves. They have to, get their own bumps and bruises kind of thing. And I'm not really sure I agree. Part of me is like, look, if someone can tell me how to not get injured, I'd really like to listen to them instead of getting injured.
Totally. Yeah.
And,
I believe that.
and, but I also think that, what I found even in doing this podcast, we interview dads and we go, hey, did your kid listen? And they go, no. No, they didn't listen at all. They in fact obstinately didn't listen. They were sure not to. And and so I have the hope that I can, and that little thing I read earlier about the top of the mountain and have to work for it. I save these things. I have a journal I save for my kids that I'm like, here, I want to give you this. It has these stories of my like successes and foibles and how I should have done things different or how I did do this thing right and how I failed this other thing or whatever it was, but so that you can read them and go, okay, this does work. This doesn't work. And most of them are more based on philosophy rather than like true implementation.
Yeah.
But I think about some things that I did in my dating life where, I'm just so upset that I ever, the worst one that I did was I took a woman back after she cheated on me.
Yeah.
And I look back and I go, what were you thinking? Why would you ever have done that?
What were you thinking?
I mean, I was, I wanted to work. I mean, there's a reality of it. I look back and go, I wanted it to work. And, and now that I see what's involved in, a marriage and what's involved in really being committed to someone, and I go, look, relationship, there's a breakup. You don't hear happy couples where they're, oh, well, we broke up and got back together and broke up and got back together and broke up and got back together. And now we've been happily married for 20 years. You don't hear that. You don't hear that. The reality is things go good. And then if there's something that causes the break in that, if it, especially in dating, that should be it. There should be it. And a lot of people don't like to admit that. They go, oh, well, we broke up for a little bit. We're taking a break or whatever it is. That's it. That's it. Best to move on.
I think so.
And, and the longer you end up hanging out in this phase of having that not be the case, it's not a benefit to either party. It's not a benefit to either party. And, and those, and once you're married, I've had friends who have, gotten the D word. I don't want to bring it up, but, generally with those individuals who are married and they've got kids, I've got a different stance on it. I go, hey, you got kids, you got to figure out how to make things work.
Totally.
That's really my stance.
Yeah.
If you got kids, the idea that, oh, well, I'll be happier single or whatever it is. Generally, I actually think that's incorrect. I think they're looking at a grass is greener mentality. And, and I've seen some studies, I don't know how much of these are accurate, where they say, there's some percentage of people that are polled after 10 years of being divorced. And my parents, they got divorced when I was about 4. And neither of them, I don't think neither of them ever, it really worked in a beneficial way for either of them. It was pretty horribly damaging for both, to be really honest. And had they been able to work through it, I don't know how realistic that idea is for me as now a 44-year-old person, like looking back from, 30, 40 years ago. But what I will say is that once you're married, you have a lot more people to really think about in regards to those things. And when I look at those things, it's also the reason, going back to why, my wife and I just take things so seriously. We go, hey, look, like, we don't want that to be anything that we ever have to deal with. So, but going back to, when people are dating, if there's a break, there's something that happens, it is time to move on. Do not have the broken glass, do not have the mistrust, do not have these things that cause people to, make bad decisions even within their relationship. And I think that's so magnified by a lot of 20s behavior, which is surrounded around drinking.
Yeah.
Because you look at people who do these things, and I don't think people are inherently bad, but when you're talking about a lifestyle that has so much drinking involved and breakups and getting back together and breaking up again, and and then all of a sudden there's all this toxicity and broken glass, and I just go, gosh, this is so bad. So back to what I was saying, I have this journal and I keep it for my kids, and I go, I want them to be able to read these things and go through it and go, hey, and the reason I write it also is because I'm going to be old when they're dating.
How old do you
I don't
think?
even want to say, but I'll be older. I try not to have the old mindset in line because, I remember back when I was in my 20s thinking about how I would be when I was 40 and thinking how that would just be
the end, right?
Oh my God.
And we're just figuring it out. I feel like I just
and I look back and I go, no, not at all. In fact, not even close.
Yeah. Have you looked at the pictures though at 40-year-olds now compared to like during like Seinfeld times? They were 40.
Oh yeah.
Like what a 40-year-old when we were younger.
I think they probably still look like that. I just think we remember them when we were 20.
I feel like all the microplastics have preserved us.
In the journaling, I just want to write it while it's fresh.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it where I can still remember it very well.
Oh,
and I can go into it within detail.
I wish I would have had something like that from my dad. The story.
I hate to say it, so part of me does go like, if I kick the bucket early, like I want to have something that's like documented to have them have,
yeah, beautiful.
And they'll know that I wrote it for them. So, we've got the boy and the girl right now. So I definitely think of these things in both ways. And my plan really is to be giving them both the exact same advice.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm giving my son advice of why he has to work hard and why he has to do these things. And with my daughter, don't get me wrong, I want to tell her to work hard, but part of me doesn't feel like it's as important.
Really?
No.
That's really interesting.
It does. I don't like, I know she will, and she comes from some very intelligent parents. She does. I know. Pat myself on the back.
I love that, Brad.
My wife not talking about my wife. My wife is fantastic at math.
Mm.
I'm good at math.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is really good at math, which is not. I shouldn't be like so surprised, but but there'll be certain things where I'll be going through, financial investment returns, which is it gets pretty meaty.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be looking at this spreadsheet for way too long, and I'll go, "Hey, babe, I need you to look at this."
Yeah.
And she'll come in, and she'll go, "What's the problem?" And I go, "This and this is supposed to total this, but the weighted average of this and this isn't coming out to this particular number, and I can't figure out why." And she'll go, "It's right here." This happened more than once,
Wow.
And but with so I guess with my daughter, don't get me wrong, I will be teaching both of my kids that they need to work hard in whatever it is they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If they're doing it, they should be doing it to the best of their ability, always.
Mm-hmm.
But back to kind of my comment in regards to, men are kind of taking on what they can achieve. That's not a bar for women. When a male is looking to date a female, it's not, well, what has she achieved?
Yeah.
That's not generally a question. It's going to be other questions on, how does I hate to say how does she behave, but how does she, how is she? Is she someone who can raise kids? Is she someone who I can partner with? Is she someone I can trust, for the rest of my life where I'm working and she's, a supporter with me? I'm so thankful for my wife that she's such a supportive individual. Just amazingly so. But when I look at those things for the two of them, I'll be giving both of them. They'll both hear the advice of the other, so when I'm giving my son this advice, my daughter will be right there hearing it. And when I'm giving him this advice, she'll be hearing it also. So, because those are the same things, I might be telling my son how to be working, but I'll also be telling him in regards to who he's dating, these things about finding a partner who, works, all the same things we're kind of talking about, finding people who are the right fit rather than just right there. And hopefully, if able, reduce the amount of broken hearts as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what about your daughter dating? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you think about?
I think about making sure that she's picking well. Picking well. And again, a lot of these things are as good as we can. I'm really concerned that my daughter is going to have my personal. I was so petulant. I was such a partier. And I was wild in so many different ways. And I'm like, please tell me. Except the part of me
put it in your book.
Except part of me thinks she's going to, because she, she's the second child. She's the second, and and she, and my wife is gorgeous. So my daughter is only 7 months, but she's also gorgeous. And with her, it'll be a lot of similar things in regards to, finding a guy who's going to be partnering with you, building something together. I do think finding someone who comes from a good family is important. I don't think that's an all in all. Like, I'm not like, oh, well, they have to come from this. I don't think that, but I do think that's important for them to have good cognition in regards to the person they're dating and where that person got their instruction.
Mm-hmm.
I think that actually does matter. For me, and even in this conversation, I got a lot of it over a time period I wish was significantly shortened. I wish that I hadn't gotten it from so many, I'll call it bad relationships that didn't work, but it took longer. I would have liked to have that had been a shorter thing.
Yeah.
And, and so for her, finding someone who treats her well, who is in it to win it. I still believe in marriage and a romantic connection. I hear a lot of people really talk about, don't ever get married or this and this.
I've heard so much of that lately.
Yeah. And I've loved being married. I don't like the government being involved. That's something I get a little bit more kind of like upset by. The government's hand in, I saw, I follow this guy on Instagram, but he's a divorce attorney out of New York, and he has some of these commentaries. Maybe you saw this one?
Wait, no, keep going.
Anyway, he was talking about how, within a divorce, the male is asked to do child support, alimony, give up all these assets, all these different things. But that in an agreement between the husband and wife, the husband had these agreements that were financial, but the wife's agreements were not financial because they don't document these, but are to be supportive and caring and loving and have sex and do these things that are also very, very important. But that the government can't obligate these items. They can obligate the male. They can obligate the male on the financial side, but they can't obligate the female to these other parts of it. And I kind of heard that, and I went, "Well, yeah, that actually is kind of accurate. I don't know how you would quite fix that." But from my standpoint, I think the best way to try to fix that is to make sure that when you're getting married, you are picking the right person so that you're not getting involved in those things. I don't want to be involved in those things.
Yeah.
I am so happy that I have my wife and my kids, and I'm so thankful for those things, and I don't ever want anything to separate those things, but I picked right, and those concerns on a later basis are, I think something that becomes too common in regards to women choosing I shouldn't say women, I'm sorry, people choosing their partner in general now, where there's this kind of like, well, how does the law affect these things, or how do those things come in? And that saddens me. I definitely don't have this view that women shouldn't, that there should be some kind of like, I'll call it immediate cutoff, and that's that. But I've heard some pretty massive horror stories of women doing some pretty bad things and the male really having to eat it as a result. And I might just know more of those stories because I'm a male, but I've heard several stories of that where, what I've also heard of, and this is kind of a sad one, but I've heard of several stories where the female will have an affair and the guy will stay there because he knows he has to keep the family together. And when it's reversed, I've heard it not going the same way.
Yeah. I think there is a crazy amount of like just pressure on men kind of keeping those things quiet,
It's such a hard one.
Like, men not sharing about that stuff is probably more often than not. That's probably what's happening.
Yeah, I think you're right. The individuals who I've known, they still fall back on it's the right thing to do to keep my family together, and my kids need a mom. And I guess.
Yeah, it's so much pressure.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. But I guess with both of my kids, I just want to be able to help them to pick the right individuals.
How are you going to do that?
This is everything we're talking about. Talking to them. To be really honest, talking to them.
Yeah.
Talking to them, making sure that they hear all these stories, even if they're like, Dad, I don't want to hear that. I'm sure that's how they'll be. And, but being able to actually just be open with them. I want to make sure that I'm open with them enough so that they can talk to me about these things and that I don't talk at them, but that they know that I'm always there to be a support.
Yeah.
Hopefully they will. Hopefully they will talk to me. Hopefully I'll be able to give them advice, and hopefully they'll also still feel comfortable enough to talk to me about it. And I have been within my friend circle that individual over the years where people talk to me about stuff where I don't judge them for it. And I think maybe from my own, maybe I got that from my own parents. My mom, she died, again, 13 years ago, and I love and miss my mom, but she was a very difficult woman for me to grow up with. And I learned some very good patient listening skills as a result of having her presence in my life. that's something that I found is been welcomed amongst several of my friends.
Yeah. I think I was just thinking your children are probably going to learn the most from watching the way that you treat your wife.
So I can't hit her anymore?
Nope. Stop it now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
I think they're just going to absorb.
Within this podcast, there's definitely been a lot that we've learned. Mm-hmm. We have. We had one guy on, and he just straight up was like, my wife and I have a relationship coach that they see like maybe once or twice a year, maybe 4 times a year. Mm-hmm. I forget, but they would go in and they would have their things they talk about, and to make sure that they were just staying in good communication about these things, so nothing was getting left under the surface, kind of to make sure the car stays, the oil stays changed.
Totally,
to the car,
yeah.
Kind of thing. And that's something I think that is also an ongoing learning experience where, because being married is new when you do it, and then you also have to work on that like you do everything else. You have to work on making sure you're doing dates, doing, whatever it is that you do that, helps you stay romantic. I've known a couple of divorced women who have made the comment that a lot of women, once they have kids, forget how to be a wife or a partner, and they learn it. They go into mom land as opposed to being a partner, and that's something that I think just knowledge is best. You need to pay attention to it so that you're not falling into some of those paths. Did you ever follow Pearl? Pearl, you should interrupt me if I'm talking too much, by the way.
What's Pearl?
Pearl, I can't think of her last name. She's a social media influencer. She's got red hair. She generally is talking very anti-feminist views on social media. Talks a lot about how women will cause the problems in marriages. She's very she's a female who talks very much about how women statistically can cause so many problems in relationships, and how fatherless homes where the mother is leading is wildly more damaging on the kid than having motherless homes, because she's like, kids need their dads more than their moms. Like, she goes into a lot of these stats. The one thing that I see in some of these social media clips regarding the advice from these individuals is they miss one really clear component, because they'll talk often about how, an individual who has over a certain number of sexual partners, they usually talk very specifically about women regarding this, have over a certain number of sexual partners where their ability to pair bond within a relationship is like damaged and all this stuff, and it's very like negative. And I look at that and I go, they're missing the one factor here of just knowledge. People look at that, well, then you can start working on it. You look at this information, you go, wait a minute, can I fix this? And the answer is yes. Well, then good. And I've said this a number of times even today, but I would have been an at-risk youth had it not been for sports. Had it not been for sports.
I love that you found a way.
I am so thankful that I had guys I went to school with who got me to work harder and find out I could be good at something for sports. Really.
It's a community thing.
It's a community thing. Totally. And I look back and I go, if I had not had that, I really don't know where I'd be. But in the sense of, being able to have knowledge and change things, once you know something, you can now affect a change. And, so when I hear about people who come from certain backgrounds, and they're like, oh, well, because you came from this background, you're going to end up like this. Like, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true at all. I think if anything, I came from this background. Now I know. Okay. And that means that I can make a different decision. I do not have to just do whatever it is, the numbers according to the statistics that some people look at as some kind of a crystal ball of how the future is going to go. That's not accurate. It's just the history. So I don't have as defeatist a view.
I can see that in you from our conversations that we've had.
Can you?
Yeah. I think you're a little bit rebellious with getting out of the box.
Oh, yeah.
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 No boxes. I don't know if you were born that way or if that was just a personality trait, but I could see you sort of rejecting any structure that someone was like, oh, this is probably what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're like, there might be a different way.
There might be, or there is, just straight up is.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny. I see it both ways. There's sometimes where I look at things. It depends on what the thing is.
Okay.
There's sometimes where I look at things and I go, if the path is already paved, you can just take the path.
Sure.
It's fine. If you go, hey, this is the easiest way from here to there. You do that.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing with my kids' advice. I'm like, I want to make sure you guys have the knowledge to just take the right path. But there's other situations where I guess I'm meaning it mostly within the certain dating. I guess I'll mention it like this. It's
Okay.
like the statistic. When I was a kid, people used to say things like, "Oh, you're going to marry someone like your mom.
Mhm.
You're going to marry someone like your dad. And if your
Mhm.
mom or your dad were not good, you're going to marry someone not good."
Mhm.
Or or a parent saying something like, "Oh, this was my mom's to me. You're going to be just like your father."
Mhm.
Except she hated my father.
Yeah.
So
Like, why would I do that?
Well, it's also kind of like, well, what are you saying to me?
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
so it's this like, it's the statement where, she tells a 5-year-old, "You're just like
Yeah.
your dad. Oh, by the way, I hate your dad."
Yeah.
The kid's taking that however they are, and you impart these certain things into your head, and you start living this life that you think is supposed to be according to, what even an authority figure said to you.
Mhm.
And, because when those comments come down and, and my mom, I felt so sorry for her. She had such a difficult upbringing, and I love her and I miss her. But, there were some things that she was dealing with from her own childhood that she was never really able to get rid of.
Mhm.
And my sister and I really had to, unfortunately, deal with a lot of that when we were growing up. But my point is that you identify these things, you can make different paths. You want to make a different path, you can make a different path. You do not need to adopt, adhere to, or whatever it is, believe what someone told you about your future that is just not necessarily correct.
Mhm.
Not correct. It's correct. If you let it be correct, it'd be correct. But you don't have to. You can do what you want.
That was beautiful.
You're so sweet. I love that you let me
No, that was beautiful.
opine on this
No,
one.
I filmed with someone that said, a teacher, a coach, and she was saying that we practice disappointment. So like, I believe that there's no one out there in the dating world. There's no available men that want commitment. I'm in that belief. I'm only looking and able to see in my reality men that aren't ready. But if I just open myself up to the possibility that there might be, and that I only need one, and that like it could be really good, it could, there could be someone out there that's amazing, and be in that possibility and start looking for that. Like I start seeing it around me.
That's why for when I was asking earlier, is the dating world really as bad as we think it is, or is it just in our heads? Because I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I look and I go, because it wasn't like 20 years ago dating was easy. Like it
Mhm.
wasn't like all because that's the thought. Oh, well,
Yeah.
it used to be easy.
Mhm.
It wasn't easy. It was still hard. It was just a different hard.
Yeah.
And now I look at it and I go, well, or is it actually hard? But I agree with what you said.
Yeah.
You're gonna I'm not gonna have that defeatist mindset for my kid. Oh,
Yeah.
you throw your hands up in the air and go, no.
That took me about 4 years to get to that point where I started living in the possibility a little bit more. And that took so much like mindset and abundance, like playing with the abundance of what is available.
Mhm.
And then also just like going deeper within myself. Again, I'm going to say it and being like, I want partnership.
Mhm.
I really want it. And there's got to be other people out there that are like me.
And there are.
Yeah.
And there are.
And they might be hiding. I feel like my boyfriend was kind of like
hiding,
just wasn't on the apps, like wasn't interested. He was doing the things that he loved. He was building his business. And I had to find him in that space. I didn't find him on the apps.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't find him on the apps.
So
it
you
was
found
in
him-
real life, in the wild.
Good.
Yeah. And it was at a work event.
Great.
Yeah.
And
And
you were working.
Yeah, I actually saw a picture of him before I went, and I was like, I think that's my guy.
There you go.
I kind of knew.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, Jessica, this has been such a great conversation.
It's been so good.
This
Max.
has been really
I could
good.
talk to you forever.
I know. It's so great. We could do more of these.
Yeah.
So Sapphirus Media, how do people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. That's Sapphirus Media. I would start there. Yeah.
And spell Sapphirus so everyone can hear it.
SAPHIRIS.
Great.
Media.
And what do you do?
Production and marketing. Podcasts, any video things you could ever want. I love taking photos. That was the beginning of my journey. kind of like anything creative media wise.
And Sapphirus, what's your Instagram though?
It's Sapphirus Media.
That is your Instagram now?
Yeah,
When
it
I
is.
see you on Instagram, that is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I have my personal account. This is Jessica Elaine Clough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do a really good job with all your photos.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I recommend people take a look at those also because she's a
Awesome.
fantastic photographer.
Thank you.
Well, Jessica, it's been so good having you on.
Thank you, Max.
And I'm so glad to hear about your great relationship.
Yeah, I'm so happy.
All right.
It's awesome.
All right. Real estate dads, we recommend more dads. Fix the dating world. You can do it and everything will be fine. I need a better tie off than that. What's the better tie off?
There's hope.
No.
Don't give up. Go to therapy.
This sums up our first conversation on dating in the modern world. And we support more dads and we support more guys finding their role as a dad. And we want to constantly encourage it. Get connected with us and we want to talk with you more. If you've got a conversation about dating, it's a great story. Get in contact with us. We'd love to hear it. Thank you.